Episode 256. Till Death Do Us Apart. Serena shuddered under the blanket. The heavy and rapid breathing revealed her mood. Nola covered her mouth, released Serena's hand, got up, and walked out of the ward. When she went out to see Carson, she could not hold back and cried. "What should we do? Our son! Our son!" Carson Robinson could not help but become red-eyed, taking out a tissue to wipe his tears. Nola squatted down and burst into tears. When Alex came back, he was still wearing a military green uniform, but he didn't get to see the body of his brother Jake. Panting and seeing his parents and brother standing at the door of the ward, he looked incredulous. Walking up to them, he touched Keith's shoulder. Keith took a deep breath, and his eyes were already red. When he saw Alex coming over, he turned and gave him a big hug. Alex had never seen his brother do this. His heart felt empty. Looking at the room, he asked, "Is Serena inside?" "Yeah." Keith let go of him, his eyes slightly moist. "I never even heard a whimper. She's been crying secretly." Alex took a step back and looked at them. The straight and tall military green figure was majestic. He asked, "Have you seen his body?" "No." Keith covered his face in pain, sitting on the stool. His voice slightly choked. He sobbed with strong self-blame. "In that kind of explosion, how can the body be found?" "How could there be no body? There has to be a body, right?" Alex did not want to believe that his younger brother Jake, who was so proud and outstanding, was gone like this. What a joke. Any of them could die first. But Jake, he was the type to outlive them all and laugh until the end. He was shameless, resilient, and tenacious, determined to be extraordinary. How could he die? "Without seeing his body, I absolutely do not believe that he's dead." Alex sounded powerful, looking at Keith. "Have you looked for it? Are you sure?" Keith did not speak or take his hands down. He sat there quietly, covering his face. Suddenly, a group of people wearing police uniforms came over. When seeing them, one of the police force asked, "You are the family of Jake Robinson? I'm the police officer in charge of this case. My name is Sandra Pierce." Keith finally looked up and gazed at the police officer. "We found something at the scene that's likely to belong to Mr. Robinson. Would you confirm?" Boom. The ward door suddenly opened, hit the wall and bounced back. A slender figure ran over with bare feet. Serena was pale, her eyes red and swollen and her hair messy. She looked at what was in the police officer's hand. The thing was packed in a plastic bag. It was blackened and completely deformed by the fire. But the shape and the small diamonds and gems that were burned gray showed it was a bird-like thing. Serena saw this object and her lips trembled. She reached out and took the plastic bag. Touching her own neck, she felt a noble and elegant swan. The lines were smooth, soft, and delicate. Judging by the gems and the diamonds, these two should have been a pair. This was a pair of swans, symbolizing the most loyal love. They would love each other till death do them apart. It was legend that swans had the most loyal love. They would be loyal to each other till death do them part. Serena's eyes were blurred. She did not want to cry. No one would care for her. No one would help her dry her tears. Looking down, she let tears fall on her feet. She discovered that she had forgotten to wear shoes. The floor was really cold. "Jake, help me bring the shoes over and give me a foot rub, just like this morning, will you?" No one responded. Serena pulled the corner of her lips and only felt a splitting headache. The people around her seemed to be talking, but she couldn't hear a word. Slowly turning around and walking towards the hospital bed, she said nothing. She was very tired. "Darling, hold me. I will fall." Her vision was getting darker, and her body was getting weaker. Serena's legs became limp. She fell straight towards the side. For the next few days, she was always half asleep. Her appetite was very bad. She was basically relying on infusion to maintain physical functions. And finally, on the 4th day, she asked to be checked out. Going back to the old house, she fell asleep again. When she woke up, it was already in the evening. There was no light in the room, and it was very dark. When Serena opened her eyes, she saw a tall figure standing by the bed. Wearing a suit, he seemed to be aware of her wakening. He turned over and looked at her. He had a chiseled face and calm look. He curled his eyes when seeing her. She could not believe it, freezing for a while. Jake had a deep, doting look in his eyes. Looking at her, he became tender and gentle. Walking slowly over, he rubbed her hair and smiled. "You're getting more lazy now." Serena's eyes were filled with tears. She reached out and wanted to touch his hand, but as her hand stretched out, the handsome figure disappeared without a trace. Under the dim light, nothing was there. Nobody. There was no Jake. Nothing at all. "My love!" Serena sat up and reached for the place where he had just stood, but caught only the air. No, nothing. Large drops of tears fell. She held the quilt, curling up at the corner of the bed, and bursting into tears. The door was knocked on, and she ignored it, covering her head and staying motionless. The door was quickly opened. Captain Robinson walked in with a cane and turned on the light. The luxurious crystal chandelier was up high, illuminating everything with yellow light. He slowly walked up, moved the stool at the vanity over, and sat down next to the bed. Serena finally became herself, took a tissue to dry her tears, and called, "Grandpa!" Captain Robinson looked at her in distress, his eyes slightly damp. He nodded and asked her kindly, "Shall we eat? Your grandpa hasn't eaten yet, and you know old people can starve." "I'm not hungry," Serena sighed and said. "How is that possible? You didn't eat last night and you've been sleeping the whole day. You have to eat something. The babies must be hungry." She looked in the direction of her belly under the quilt. "Jake is gone. These 2 children are the only proof that he has lived. You can't even keep them healthy for him?"